Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick! Plays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for January the 24th, 1/24/24, episode number 1400. And there's no way not to lead with it. South Carolina men's basketball, Lamont Paris get their signature win last night, knocking off number 6 Kentucky 79-62. Kentucky came into the game with the number 1 scoring offense in the country, averaging almost 92 points per game. They had 25 at halftime. Just a tremendous performance, wire to wire, for Lamont Paris, getting his first signature win of this season. Although, honestly, you could go back to Virginia Tech and say that was a signature win. Of course, Virginia Tech not having the kind of season we hoped they would have. But the Gamecocks go to 16-3, 4-2 in the SEC. They have a home game with Missouri, who they've already beaten on the road. And Lamont Paris's team made big jumps in the net and the Ken Palm. And just a signature win last night. It was Kentucky's lowest point total of the season. They had only been held under 80 points one time. It was the first time they'd been held under 70 points, getting just 62 points against the Gamecocks. South Carolina led by Talon Cooper, who was masterful all night long, 20 points, 6 rebounds, 3 big offensive rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 block shots for the point guard from Dorman. He was 8 of 11 from the field, 2 of 4 from downtown, and 2 of 2 from the free throw line. Look, when you pull a major upset like this, you got to have some people chip in and do some things they hadn't been doing. Jacoby Wright was one of those guys last night. He's been in almost a season-long slump from 3. Last year, he was shooting in the high 30s from 3, almost a 40% three-point shooter. Coming into the game, he was 23% on the season. All he did was go 3 for 3 from downtown in the first half, then hit his first one of the second half. He finished 4 of 8 from the field, 4 of 7 from downtown, 2 of 4 from the free throw line. He had 14 points. Michi Johnson also with 14 points, including just the exclamation point. You know it's your night when Jacoby Wright, Talon Cooper, and Zach Davis are throwing up buzzer beater threes. And then at the end of the game, Michi threw up a 40-footer that hit nothing but the bottom of the net. He had 14 points, 5 of 11, 2 of 4 from downtown, 2 of 2 from the free throw line. What can you say about Josh Gray going up against 3 7-footers? And when they put Big Z into the game, the 7'2" Croatian, who was unbelievable in his debut against Georgia, knocking down 3-pointers. He got welcomed to the SEC last night. Lamont Paris said their game plan was when Big Z went in, they were putting Josh Gray's big body on him. And you see a pass to the wing, Josh Gray duck in and knock Big Z back about 3 feet, catch a bounce pass, turn, drop step, turn, and throw down a thunder dunk. Josh Gray had 9 points on 4 of 6 from the field, 1 of 1 from the free throw line. He got an and one on one of those finishes, walked up to the free throw line and shot it like a 90%er. String music. Josh Gray, 9 points and 6 rebounds in 11 minutes last night. Have yourself a night, Josh Gray. Got to see him in the post game. Don't see that a lot. And then kind of my unsung hero on the night, Colin Murray Boyles. He was as good as any freshman on the floor, and Kentucky probably has 3 lottery picks that were in the starting lineup for them that are true freshmen. Boyles, I thought he scored in double figures, but he had 6 points, 2 of 5 from the field, 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 9 rebounds, 4 big offensive rebounds, 5 assists, 3 block shots at 6'7", and 2 steals for Colin Murray Boyles. Just an unbelievable game. It was not BJ Mack's best game, but I thought he hit one of the biggest shots of the night after going 1 for 8 in the first half and only scoring 2 points, going 0 of 2 from 3. Kentucky scores the first 4 points of the second half. Mack knocked down a big pick and pop 3 that put the Gamecocks back up 7 in the second half. Had another one later in the game. But you know, Kentucky, they were never able to get over the hump. They were never able to go on a run. Kentucky, as John Whittle will tell you in our interview in just a couple of minutes that we recorded this morning at 8 a.m. Central Time. So it's already been a long morning for me now into the afternoon. Kentucky never scored 2 field goals in a row. There was a couple possessions where they hit a field goal, made some free throws, but they never made a run. And South Carolina not only ended the first half on a 17-4 run to take a 33-25 lead, but they just ran off and left Kentucky and led by double digits for about the last 12 minutes of the game last night. Jared says it was electric, took the wife and kids, great experience for a Gamecock of any age, no doubt about it. WM or WJM41 said Josh Gray dropped his nuts last night, no doubt about that. And Mack, that 3 did pop the net. That was a really big shot, I thought, for South Carolina's confidence, because Kentucky cuts the lead in half. they had a chance to cut into the lead even more. And if they do, you think, oh no, here we go. And then Mac answers, and the Gamecocks continued to answer throughout the night. We'll get into all of that and more with John Whittle. We take a deep dive into that game. We'll also address some of the other headlines of the day. Obviously, on Sunday, Pete Lembo named the head football coach at the University of Buffalo. So Shane Beamer has a big opening to fill on his staff. Not sure on which direction he will go on that. If he just adds another guy that could be assistant head coach and special teams coach, does he add a defensive coach that could also have a special teams background? It will be interesting to see how that goes. But I think it's time that we start giving Lamont Paris credit for this team. Jared, no doubt about it, something special is brewing with this team. They got a chance to be ranked in the top 25 for the first time in a long time if they can take care of business with Missouri. Now, Tuesday, you got to go to Rocky Top and take on Tennessee. Then you got to go to Georgia. Then you play Ole Miss. So you got a chance to, I think, if you can make shots, right? Like last night, South Carolina made shots. Okay. They shot over 50% in the second half, 16 for 29, 55%. They were 29 of 60 for the game and 11 of 24 from three in the first half. They were, I believe, 6 for 12 from downtown. And so about 50%. And Gamecocks 10 of 14 from the free throw line and 9 of 11 in the second half. They knocked down free throws. They out-rebounded Kentucky. They played exceptional half-court defense. They have great ball movement. I thought Lamont Paris did some great things in the after timeout plays, on baseline and sideline, out-of-bounds plays. I mean, look, there's two sides to the portal. Let's look at Arkansas. I think they had like the number 1 ranked portal class in the country, and those guys can't play dead in a movie together. I mean, it's like the island of misfit toys. They don't have buy-in. They don't play well together. South Carolina boat raced them at Bud Walton Arena on Saturday. BJ Mack did shoot it on Saturday. Now, everybody did, Talon Cooper included. But this is really a special group with the buy-in. As good of half-court offense as South Carolina plays, their defense has just been outstanding. We get into that, some of the reasons for that from Lamont Paris's post game. So we definitely will talk about that. On Friday, if you missed it, Shane Beamer officially added James Coley as wide receivers coach. This guy's worked for Bobby Bowden. He's worked for Kirby Smart. He worked for Nick Saban with the Dolphins. He's been a coordinator in the ACC and the SEC. Worked for Jimbo Fisher. He will be the wide receivers coach. Marquell Blackwell, who was also on that Texas A&M staff with him, he will come in as South Carolina's running back coach. That is a major upgrade to that position. Shane Beamer talking about being able to recruit and to retain your own players, to develop your own players, and to manage your room to where issues don't make it to his office. And certainly there were a couple of those last season. That's why Montario Hardesty is no longer on staff. He could not recruit. He could not retain his players. And so a major upgrade. Marquell Blackwell, James Coley said, I don't like recruiting against this guy, and I've had to recruit against him. Called him an elite recruiter. Marquell Blackwell has also been a coordinator, been with one of the brightest minds in all of college football, in my opinion, Dana Holgorsen at West Virginia, and then at Houston for 3 years. So he's got 4 years in the state of Texas. He's a native of Tampa, played at USF, started his coaching career in Tampa as a high school coach. And so with Coley, you get great South Florida roots. With Marquell Blackwell, you get Tampa. And these guys have spent time recruiting in the state of Texas. And there's nothing wrong with that. There are plenty of players in the state of Texas that are not going to Texas or Oklahoma or Texas A&M. So I think Shane Beamer's made 2 big-time hires. It'll be interesting to see what he does with that Pete Lembo vacancy. Is it just special teams, or do you hire a dedicated linebackers coach so that Clayton White can be a walk-around coordinator and a guy that has special teams background? We'll be monitoring that closely. Yesterday, a pair of South Carolina women's basketball players were named to this year's McDonald's All-America team in 6'3" forward Joyce Edwards of Camden and 5'8" point guard Madison McDaniel of Upper Marlboro, Maryland, and Bishop McNamara. They become the 19th and 20th McDonald's All-Americans to sign with Dawn Staley out of high school, and the 24th and 25th McDonald's All-Americans to play for Dawn Staley at South Carolina. Edwards is the second highest scorer in the history of South Carolina girls basketball with over 3,500 points. She is considered the number 2 player in the country by ESPN, has been named to the Naismith High School Player of the Year midseason team. Edwards, a 3-time South Carolina Basketball Coaches Association 3A State Player of the Year, and is the reigning Gatorade Circle of Champions South Carolina Player of the Year. McDaniel, rated number 12 in the class. Other scouting services have her higher. Some scouting services have Edwards as the number 1 player in the country. She is the reigning Washington, D.C. Catholic Athletic Conference Player of the Year. She's averaging 15 points per game and 5-to-1 assist to turnover ratio. She's also on that Naismith High School midseason watch list. South Carolina's other signee, Adele Tack, would have been a McDonald's All-American, in my opinion, had she not suffered a separated kneecap. She graduated from high school early, enrolled at South Carolina, having her surgery, doing her rehab, and she's with the team. And so another phenomenal recruiting class for Dawn Staley. Tomorrow night, it will be number 1 South Carolina at number 9 LSU. That will be 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central. ESPN College Game Day will be there. It will be the first women's game they have appeared in which they have appeared this season. And this is the hottest ticket around. Tickets in the lower level going for $3,500 plus on the secondary ticket market. That's why I'll be watching that game from home. All right, jump into the Nana's Porch chat box. Leave your comments. After this commercial message, John Whittle will join us. I'll be answering your questions live in the chat as we recorded this interview early this morning, as Whittle had baseball and softball media availability this afternoon, so he was not able to join us live. But we'll be back right after this commercial message with John Whittle from thebigspur.com.
If you enjoy listening and watching the free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com, Colin Taylor and Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter @KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter @GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPodDaily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
And we welcome in John Whittle from thebigspur.com, who was at that huge kind of landmark. Well, not landmark, but you get the, I guess, well, it's so early, the words are escaping me here. It's the signature win last night. But let's just get to it. Everybody wants to know your take on the latest season of True Detective.
Hadn't watched a lick.
Good morning.
Hadn't watched a lick, but last night was certainly a lot of fun. The crowd was phenomenal. The team played, followed up its best performance of the season the other night against Arkansas with its best performance again of the season last night against Kentucky. So. When guys are knocking down open shots and the defense continues to do what it's been doing here lately, that's going to, allow South Carolina to win a lot of basketball games.
No doubt about it. So, you had the blackout. I really was intrigued to see how that would turn out. The team wore their black jerseys, so Kentucky was wearing white. Lamont had on his black quarter zip. I slept in the game. No, I'm just kidding. But certainly a big-time atmosphere, and Kentucky coming into the game, the number one scoring offense in all of college basketball, averaging almost 92 points per game. And, John, when you look at it, It's the first time all season they've been held under 70 points. It's only the second time all season they've scored less than 80 points. And when you go back to their early season signature win against North Carolina, 87, 95, 96, 87, 90, 97, 90, and 105 against the Georgia team, the same one that came into Colonial Life Arena last week and beat South Carolina. And they had 25 points at halftime, only 62 for the game. And there's a reason why South Carolina is the number one defensive team in the SEC.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Kentucky has a whole bunch of scorers. They got 4 guys averaging double figures. I mean, they got a guy who's averaging almost 20 points. Every guy but one on that roster was held below his scoring average last night. And, it's a credit to what South Carolina is able to do defensively. They take tremendous pride in doing that. And they take tremendous pride in shutting down the ball handler, whether it's regardless of what position you're talking about, but those guys do a great job of playing with their feet and being square, bodying up, and just not allowing transition and penetration. And Kentucky likes to play early in the shot clock. They like to get a shot off within the first 7 or 8 seconds, and South Carolina had held Kentucky to its fewest transition points of the season last night. And they did everything right. I mean, South Carolina did everything right defensively. They guarded without fouling. They played physically. They got back when they missed shots. They did everything right.
No doubt about it. I mean, to pull off an upset like this, when you have a team that's a top 5, top 6 opponent comes in, usually they need to help you a little bit by not making as many shots. And then you got to do a lot of things right. South Carolina, we've been waiting. You and I talked about the slump Jacoby Wright has been in with the 3-point shooting. And he breaks out last night. He goes 3 for 3 and hits his first 4 from downtown. And you have an 8-point lead at the half, despite the fact that at that point, B.J. Mack was 1 for 8 in the first half, and Meechie Johnson had not done hardly anything. But, just your thoughts on a first half where Kentucky jumps out 4-0. The Gamecocks go on a 7-0 run that included a Josh Gray duck in, drop step, and thunderous dunk over Big Z. And just the night he had by far his best game of the season.
Yeah, I think you can say that about several guys. But, yeah, it was a little bit of a slow start to the game. B.J. Mack missed and got bumped a little bit on a little turnaround in the lane that he ended up airballing, and those were the first 2 possessions. But, Zach Davis had a steal, and they left Talon Cooper wide open for whatever reason, and he hit a big 3 ball, and the crowd got into it a little bit. And Dillingham for Kentucky, he was really good. Like South Carolina kept trying to go on some little runs, and anytime South Carolina would make a shot, like he would make a shot. And, he would come back with a 3 ball, or he had a nice little floater off the glass in the lane from penetrating from the wing. He did a phenomenal job, and South Carolina did a better job on him later in the game. He had 16, he had 7 at least in the first half. So South Carolina did a better job on him later. But my point is South Carolina was doing what it needed to do to get back into the game after a little bit of a slow start, and just kept chipping away at it, and eventually took the lead with little under 5 minutes left in the first half and, never relinquished it. But, you had guys hitting open shots. You mentioned Jacoby Wright. He started out the year really well from 3-point range and looked like he had grown from last year when he had a nice 3-point percentage. I think he was hitting 36% from three, which isn't bad. That's a nice percentage. So I thought that he was going to have a big year, and he's slowed down a little bit here lately. But he saw that first one go in, and he started feeling good. I mean, that second one he hit was with a hand in his face from about 4 feet behind the arc, and it was pure. And Zach Davis hit one right at the end of the first half to give Carolina an 8-0 lead or 8-point lead going into the break. And Zach Davis has really been struggling from 3-point line here lately. And he's not a great shooter, but he knocked that one down. So yeah, you were getting contributions from everywhere when your two best guys weren't necessarily at their best, and give Kentucky some credit for that too. Like, they've got some guys who can play defense as well. And, they made it a point, and their assistant coach said it before the game. They made it a point to try to neutralize Michi and BJ as much as they could. And they did in the first half, and South Carolina still had an 8 lead.
No doubt. So let's talk about that. So Kentucky goes up 21-16 with 8:33 to go in the half. Gamecocks in the half on a 17-4 run to take that 33-25 lead. And it started with an 11-2 run, and then they hit the 2 threes back to back to in the half, Cooper and Zach Davis, to make it 33-28. And, not only does Kentucky score a lot of points, they're very efficient. I mean, they are 50% from the field, 40% from three for the season, scoring that many points. In the first half of the game, they are 2 for 10 from three and 11 for 32 from the field. DJ Wagner, who had been SEC Freshman of the Week 3 straight weeks, 1 for 7. Reeves, 1 for 7. And really, Dillingham was the only guy that was keeping them in it, quite frankly. And John Calipari in the postgame talked about the physicality of South Carolina. And Lamont Paris talked about how after the Georgia game, instead of when you get into conference play, it's normally a 2-day prep. They took 1 day before Arkansas and 1 day before Kentucky just to work on them, to go back to training camp practices, working on blocking out, working on pack line defense, staying in front of your man. And that paid off in spades. Really, the last 2 games, you've seen South Carolina sharpen the saw, and in particular on the defensive end, blocking out, rebounding. They out-rebounded Kentucky. They out-rebounded Arkansas. And just tremendous defense and physicality. Calipari said, that's a bunch of grown men. I got a bunch of 19-year-olds. Well, I mean, Trey Mitchell and, one of their other guys, they have some older guys, but they do have a lot of younger guys. And so, to me, that's always been the secret of beating Kentucky is if you got a bunch of older guys that can play great and be physical against their younger guys and force them into an off night, and that was certainly the case last night.
Yeah, for sure. And, that's one thing that was a big that was a big shortcoming for South Carolina last year, is just having a younger squad than usual, especially compared to most teams in the league and compared to most teams in college basketball with so many COVID years floating around there. South Carolina had a pretty young team. And, Kentucky might have a young team. Trey Mitchell, as you mentioned, a couple of other guys. They may have a young team, but they also have some of the most talented freshmen in the
Yes,
country,
they do.
which is not what South Carolina had last year. So, they had one of the best freshmen in the country, but not a whole roster full of them. But, this year that was a big point of emphasis to go out and get older. And, that's exactly what they did with Talon Cooper, who's played a ton of college basketball, and BJ Mack, who's done the same, and Stephen Clark, who's done the same, and Miles Studi, who's done the same. And then you throw in Amici Johnson in there, and you throw a couple of guys in who are growing, like Jacoby Wright and Zach Davis, and heck, throw Kyler Murray Boyles in there too. I mean, those guys, they've got a nice roster. South Carolina's got a really nice roster this year.
They do, and I know Lamont Paris was purposeful in the transfer portal. But, I mean, let's go back to that Arkansas game for a minute. I mean, you see Eric Musselman have one of the top transfer portal classes in the country, and their parts don't fit together. They don't play together. They look very disjointed. South Carolina led wire to wire and, led by close to 20 points in that game, just like they led Kentucky by 20 at one point in the second half. But to me, that should give Lamont Paris and what he and his staff and the players have done with the buy-in, with the culture, with the connectiveness that they have, the way they play together on both ends of the court. You just don't always get that when you get fifth-year guys coming from all over the place. But I just think this adds, another feather in Lamont Paris's cap to the kind of guys he's bringing into the program and the way they're playing together. I mean, right now, he has to be right up there for SEC Coach of the Year. People doubted this team because of the lack of a top-notch non-conference schedule. You did have the slip up against Georgia, but this team is taking care of business, and then you get that signature win. South Carolina goes from 62 to 48 in the net and from 63 to 50 in the Ken Palm. And the question is, if South Carolina can take care of business against Missouri, that would put them at 17-3, 5-2 in the SEC. Is this team ranked next week? Lamont Paris had that same question. Alyssa Lang asked him after the game. If somebody would have told you you'd be 16-3, what would you say? He said, I'd want to know how high we were ranked. So your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think South Carolina will be ranked next week, assuming they handle business against Missouri this coming weekend. I sort of get it. I mean, I think South Carolina was kind of right on the periphery of being ranked prior to that Georgia loss. I mean, they were receiving votes and in both of the polls, and you're kind of right there on cusp at that point. And, you lose to Georgia at home and don't look very good, and do that on a national broadcast on ESPNU. And, it took the wind out of the sails a little bit there for a minute. And then Arkansas is that win wasn't enough to make up for the Georgia loss. But, you start stringing some of these things together, and, pollsters look and see that, you beat the number 6 team at your home court. And, you have a road win in there against Arkansas, and then handle business against Missouri. Then, yeah, I mean, you grabbed some headlines last night, and I think that South Carolina will, assuming things go well this weekend. But at the same time, I don't have the polls have done either. So, if 5 all has a 2-0 week, might be tough luck, but I'll find its way into the rankings this week.
So let's go to the second half for just a couple minutes, and then I want to talk about some individual players. Kentucky comes out, and again, they score the first 4 points. The lead goes from 8-4, 33-29. BJ Mack hits a big three to push it back to 7. I thought that was really a critical moment in the game because you played a great first half. You held Kentucky to 25 points. But for your confidence sake and for BJ Mack's sake, even though he only had 6 points in the second half, both were big-time three-point baskets. And it kind of, gave you that little buffer again. Instead of Kentucky going on an 8-0 or 10-0 run, South Carolina was able to respond. And after that, Colin Murray-Boyle scores 4 straight for the Gamecocks. Kentucky hits some shots. It's 40-34. Mitchell scores 4 straight to get to 40-38. And that would be the closest it would get. Cooper 2, Jacoby Wright hits his 4th 3 to make it 45-37. And before you know it, it's 50-40 and then 53-40, and Calipari's calling timeout. And it was all Gamecocks after that.
What I think is really a credit to South Carolina is, last night after those 2 made baskets to start the second half, Kentucky never scored 2 field goals in a row without South Carolina scoring in between. There was one point where they had a field goal and a couple of made free throws for a little 4-0 run. But South Carolina last night against Kentucky and this past Saturday against Arkansas have not allowed runs, have not allowed the other team to get back into the game. We talk about in basketball, everybody makes a run. Hadn't been the case here for the Gamecocks giving one up against Kentucky or Arkansas here these last 2 weeks. Credit the defense, but also credit South Carolina offensively because they've gone down and scored as well. So they haven't let other teams kind of get back into it when they've built a lead. So going back to your initial thought, BJ Mack hitting that 3 ball after not having maybe the best first half. It's certainly big for him. Big for him. He hit another 3-pointer again pretty early in the half, a couple of possessions later. But BJ Mack is huge for what this team wants to be offensively. That's why Lamont Paris made him such a priority, in the recruiting process. And I know we have talked about it, certainly written about it on the Big Spur, but he didn't travel with the team up to I guess it was in Nashville last year for the SEC tournament when with the team. He met him up there. He went up to see BJ Mack before getting up to the SEC tournament in Nashville. That's how important that BJ Mack was to this program and to what Lamont wants to do with his team. So, when it's not lost on me that in BJ Mack's best games, South Carolina's played its best games. And, BJ has had moments here and there where he's had a little bit of trouble defensively in the post, but he's been overall really good down there against guys who were big, strong, and physical SEC dudes. And, he's proven to be more than good enough. He's certainly been good enough. He's been more than good enough down there. So I ton of credit to BJ Mack, but also a ton of credit to really every guy on that roster for the last 2 games, because there hadn't been really a guy on that team in the last 2 games that hadn't contributed in some way.
I mean, no doubt. I mean, I look in the box score and I see Colin Murray Boyles. He fills it up, but I swear to God, I thought he had more than 6 points. But this guy just makes plays. I mean, 6 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 block shots, 2 steals, and I mean, tied for the team lead in assists with Talon Cooper at 5. And when Kentucky got down and they started having to scramble and trap, and South Carolina got the ball in the middle of the floor to Colin Murray Boyles, he didn't play like a freshman. He played like a senior with his decision making. He played great on the defensive end, and Lamont Paris said, you know, he had such high praise for him as an SEC athlete, but said he's only scratching the surface of what he's got as a player. I mean, he was blocking 7-footers shots. He was blocking, 6'8" athletes taking the ball to the rim. He just has an uncanny knack for being able to get his hands on the ball.
Yeah, and I asked Lamont about him last night, and I haven't been able to post my game thoughts yet, I guess, from last night on the Big Spurges yet. But Colin Murray Boyles is about my centerpiece of it all, and take nothing away from Talon Cooper and his performance, and Zach Davis and his performance, and whoever else. But for me, and take nothing away from Colin Murray Boyles and what he's done at times over the course of the season, but for me, last night was Colin's coming out party. I mean, he was going against some big dudes. He was going against some talented dudes. And as you mentioned, he impacted the game in every way possible last night. He didn't have the big scoring numbers, but he was tied for the team lead in steals. Or assists. He had a couple steals, had a couple blocks, had a bunch of assists. He was awesome, and including defensively, he got his hands-on passes. He affected passes, and Josh Gray did that too. They Kentucky, when they would go pick and roll, the big guy would get in there towards the basket, and they found the guy a couple of times, but they made themselves big out on the perimeter and didn't allow that entry pass on that roll several times. Murray Boyles especially got his hand on a couple of balls too and deflected things. So Colin Murray Boyles to me was a star last night. I mean, I requested him to be one of the guys in the post-game press conference. They chose other guys, but to me, that just kind of shows that he was kind of overlooked in his performance. But I thought last night was kind of a coming out party for him based on everything that he did against all of the guys that he was able to do it against. And, we talked about BJ Mack playing the 4 and Colin Murray Boyles playing the 5 coming into this year. And very few people believe that he could do that. And he showed last night that he can, and he can play the 4, but he's pretty darn good at the 5 spot too. So I thought he was great last night.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lamont Paris has done a great job with what they do offensively to really accentuate the strengths. Like BJ Mack, he has some physical limitations. He's not going to be able to go down on the low post against everybody in the SEC. He's going to have some bad matchups, but I think Paris has limited that by bringing him out as a pick and pop guy. I would have liked to see him be maybe a half a step to a step closer to the line in the first half. When he was missing them, I thought he was maybe one step too far back, but he was really good. And I want to talk about Josh Gray for a minute, because certainly nobody struggled more mightily against Georgia than Josh Gray. You could see it in his body language, particularly from the free throw line. But last night, 9 points in 11 minutes, 6 rebounds. And 11 minutes. And, Big Z, the 7'2" Croatian, Ivicevic, or I think that's how you would say it. He made his debut against Georgia, but he got welcomed to the SEC by Josh Gray last night when he ducked in on that dude and bumped him about 3 feet up the lane, caught it, drop stepped, and dunked. And he had a 3-point play, John, and when he stepped to the free throw line, he looked like a 90% shooter. It was string music. And I was happy for him to be included in the post game last night because we don't get to see a whole lot of Josh Gray after games.
Yeah, I made the joke that they need to just have open locker room last night for us to go in there and talk to everybody. Like everybody deserved to be talked to after a game like that. But your point about Big Z, like that game he played on Saturday against Georgia, that seems like the perfect fit for him. Wide open, up and down the court. Playing at home, crowd behind you, not a whole lot of physicality. That looks like his style of game. Yeah. And then you put a team that plays tough defense out there and will be physical with you. And Josh Gray was able to do that. He certainly didn't look particularly comfortable. And, obviously Lamont Paris said that, when that dude went in, Josh Gray was going in.
That's right.
And, that was certainly a nice strategy there and really well employed. But, one of those dunks, Josh Gray's first dunk, I mean, that came about because of Colin Murray Boyles, fighting for a rebound and getting his hands in there after I think it was Big Z had come down with the rebound. And Murray Boyles got his hand in there, knocked it away, tapped it back to Talon Cooper, who threw about a 30-foot bounce pass from well beyond the three-point line down to Josh. And Josh went down and got it, caught it with his hands, and went up and slammed it home. And, we all know that Josh Gray doesn't necessarily have the best hands out there, especially on – well – really, I was going to say especially on low passes, but it really doesn't matter where the pass goes. He just doesn't have the best hands. Sometimes he catches it, sometimes he doesn't. But he went down there and caught it and threw that thing down with authority. And, a couple minutes later, he got the ball on the block. And, we've seen Josh Gray dunk, right? Like everybody says, Josh Gray never dunks. Josh Gray never dunks. If I were 7 foot and looked like him, I'd dunk it every time. Well, that doesn't happen because you have other 7-footers who are trying to keep you from dunking. But when we see Josh Gray dunk, it's typically like that first dunk we saw. Like he gets an offensive rebound or there's a defensive breakdown and he just goes up and pulls the rim, down to the floor. We don't see that second dunk very often. We don't see the back to the basket on the block and the drop step and the turn and then the thunderous dunk. Like that was a thing of beauty right there. And I'm not going to pretend that he was met with much resistance from Big Z because he but the footwork was there and the intent was there. And, that was something that was really good to see because, those are the ones that I think folks think that they want to see more of when they're yelling at Josh Gray to dunk because Josh has dunked plenty. But those are the ones we want to see a little bit more of. And, he looked very authoritative last night. And I think that kind of built on things from Arkansas because things went really well for him out there in terms of just being able to make kind of a standard play, like a play that you should make. Like there were several times against Georgia where he just kind of fumbled the ball out of bounds or did something, where you just shake your head and like, God, you should be able to do that. You're an SEC D1 scholarship basketball player. So, he had some of those bad moments against Georgia. He had some really good moments against Arkansas. I mean, he was slicing down the lane and took a pass and hit a layup and got fouled against Arkansas. And, you don't see that from Josh Gray either. So, he was really good last night. And I don't know if y'all watched the Lamont Paris, interview from Monday, I guess it was, but when we were out on the court at the Colonial Life, but Josh Gray was in the background, getting shots up, getting free throws, and in, and he's putting in the work and had a really nice game.
No doubt. So, really, the guy that is what stirs the drink, Talon Cooper. I mean, you and I both thought this was going to be a very impactful pickup, but I didn't envision what Talon Cooper's done the last 2 games. I mean, he last night, 8 of 11, 2 of 4 from downtown. I mean, it seemed like he hit every shot. 2 of 2 from the free throw line, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. He had 2 block shots. He played 36 minutes. I mean, I see a lot of people comparing him to Sindarius Thornwell, different kinds of players, but both with an old school kind of game. But Talon Cooper, the elevation of his play, particularly the last 2 games, I think is immeasurable to this team, and he's really becoming the leader of this team because he just doesn't seem fazed by anything. I mean, he seems like he's on a mission to win. Lamont Paris talked about that in the post game last night, about wanting to have success, being driven for success. He's a South Carolina guy who, I think was he at Murray State first, went to the NCAA tournament, then went to Minnesota where they did not have a lot of success, but now wants to get back, and he's leading this team to have a chance to get back to the NCAA tournament. Yeah.
I mean, you're right. I mean, he was I think it was Morehead State. That he was at. But yes, yeah. And for me, with I mean, I've said for the entire year, and it's just my opinion, but for me, Talon Cooper's been the most important player on this team. And, Michi Johnson got a lot of the headlines early, and he should have. And BJ Mack's gotten a lot of praise, and he should have. But Talon Cooper's the most important part of this team for how he sets the tone, both on the offensive and defensive end. His experience has been critical. I mean, he knows what's going on out there. And, I know I've talked about it before. I don't think I've talked about it on here with you, but, I remember up at East Carolina, one of the reporters asked him, stepped up to the line there right near the end of the game and hit 2 big free throws. Like, did you feel some nerves, feel some pressure on that, nice, good environment here, late in the game? He just laughed. He's like, nah, not at all. Like, I've played a bunch of these college basketball games. Like, if you wanted to see a little bit of pressure, like, it's last year playing on the road against Ohio State. Like, I've played a lot of college basketball. This wasn't nerves. There wasn't pressure. And, that's the way he plays the game. But, you mentioned his last couple of games, and I think, he's certainly been more assertive offensively, and I think that's in part because, he needs to be with Miles Studi out injured. Miles Studi is looked at as a shooter and a scorer, and, Talon certainly can, but, he can certainly facilitate really well too. So, but he's kind of in the zone right now, and you could tell last night he was feeling it, and, he was getting down there on the block and posting up, and, he scored in every kind of way, and that kind of fade away with the shot clock expiring midway through the second half that was the kind of night that he was having and the kind of night that the Gamecocks were having. So I don't know how he even got that thing off right in front of his bench, but he certainly knocked it down, and that's when you knew things were going to be that was going to be that it was going to be that kind of night for the Gamecocks for 40 minutes and not one of those late collapses.
I think his play is really beneficial for Michi Johnson because, you've seen it. Teams have started trying to take Michi out, of the game offensively, to not let him stand out there at 25 or 26 feet and launch. And, if you have to worry about Talon Cooper as much as you're worried about Meechie Johnson, I mean, there are a lot of things you can do there. I mean, it was just South Carolina's night, nothing more indicative of that than that shot of the game. Meechie buries a 40-footer at the end of the shot clock with 44 seconds to go. I mean, it just kind of put an exclamation point on the night. But I do think, and I want your thoughts on how Cooper's assertiveness offensively and how proficient and effective he's been could be beneficial for Meechie moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think so, because you can put your best guard on Meechie Johnson as a defender, and you're probably not going to have two elite lockdown defenders at the guard position. Maybe you will. I haven't watched all the SEC teams, but most of these teams will put their best perimeter defender on Meechie, but if Talon's out there knocking shots down, then maybe you think about what you want to do. You put your best defender on the ball because that guy can score too? Do you put it on the guy who's the Meechie, who's the team's leading scorer? How do you handle it? So but Talon has done a tremendous job as a facilitator, and while he's looking for his shot a little bit more, he's always been willing to take a shot. So he's got tremendous feel for the game and who's got the hot hand, and sometimes it's him, sometimes it's somebody else, but he's got a tremendous feel for what's happening out there, and will always be able to find the guy. And the guy is going to be Meechie a lot of nights too. So, he's certainly going to be able to, draw some eyes from the defense with the way he's playing right now. But he's also going to be able to use his eyes to find Meechie or whomever else.
So just to wrap it up, and then I want to get a little bit of football and a little bit of baseball in. I thought Lamont Paris was masterful last night with the after timeout plays, and I think he has been all season long with the ATOs, after timeouts, and the baseline out of bounds. They saw something on the film. Georgia got some stuff with some late action, and they ran some plays with some eye candy on it. And then the second guy coming around on the backside, they were able to hit Kentucky multiple times for layups on baseline out of bounds plays. When you can steal an easy bucket like that and you can do it multiple times in a game, that's just really huge, especially when you're an underdog. And I thought, and really all season long, but just last night, everybody got to see it. The job Lamont Paris is doing and this team executing on the offensive end after timeouts and on baseline out of bounds plays.
Yeah, you're right. And sometimes it's underneath, sometimes it's from the side. They've done a tremendous job all year. They called a timeout, before the first half expired, and BJ Mack got the ball down on the post, and I don't know what if I'm a betting man, Zach Davis taking a 3-point shot is probably not option 2 or maybe even option number 3. But, they were able to execute that play that was out there, with 20 seconds left in the half. So it's not necessarily something that's a quick hitter, but, they've been able to in coming out of timeouts, regardless of the situation, they've been able to execute more often than not, what they want to do. And last night was certainly a very, very nice example of that.
Yeah, it's just finding the open guy, making the right read, the ball finding an open guy. And like you said, it's kind of like a quarterback going through your progressions. Maybe, the big blocking tight end you hit wide open and he rumbles for 20 yards, that was not, read 1, 2, or 3, but you found the open guy and he executed. And so that's certainly what Zach Davis did at the end of the first half.
Well, I when it comes to basketball, I like offense. I like shooting. I'm typically soft on players when they take shots and miss them. Like I guess I have a greater threshold for what I think is a good shot and what is actually a good shot, I guess is what I'm getting at. But regardless, like when you watch this team play really all year, there have been very few games where you leave a stretch of play or the entire game where you think, there were a lot of bad shots tonight. Like this team takes good shots. They don't always make them. And in fact, I mean, prior to these last couple of games, they've been missing a lot of them. Folks wanted to talk about how the 3-point shooting on Hill since conference play began. And that's not true. It had gone downhill way before that. They were like 4 for 26 against like Charleston Southern and similar numbers against VMI and Elon. Like after that exam break, like most games after that East Carolina game were pretty crappy shooting performances, especially from 3. So it was happening before the start of SEC play where percentages were dropping off. But most of those nights they were taking good shots. It's just that a lot of them weren't going in. They've been going in here lately for guys. And but that's kind of what have really admired most about this team this year is they're taking good shots, they're taking them in rhythm, and they've got guys who can make them. And I think that's going to be, assuming that keeps up, I think that's going to be really good for this team here going forward when it comes to wins and losses.
No doubt about it. So, John, on Sunday, the news broke Pete Lembo had gotten a head coaching job at Buffalo. I guess that happened kind of suddenly because Friday afternoon, Shane Beamer was asked if his coaching staff was set. And while he said, you never say never, you think it was. And then, certainly one of the most valuable members of his staff. And I'm elated for Pete Lembo, but I think it's a significant loss for South Carolina. Just your thoughts on what Pete Lembo meant to South Carolina and the value he added to the program.
Well, I was taken a little bit off guard by it, to be honest with you. I've heard some rumblings each of the last 2 years that, Pete's in the mix for this, that, or the other when it comes to a head coaching gig. And, I've known, and certainly most folks have known that, if the right opportunity presented itself, that Pete wanted to be a head coach again. And, he was going to be a little bit picky and a little bit choosy and wanted to find the right spot and have a good opportunity and go someplace where he wanted to go. But I hadn't heard those rumblings this offseason necessarily in terms of, him being on a wish list for X job or Y job. So it took me a little bit off guard, but it makes a lot of sense. That Buffalo would want to come after him. And, I think it's certainly very impactful for South Carolina because Pete was a very well-rounded coach. He was obviously a master special teams guy who had a great eye for identifying talent at those positions and did a phenomenal job of coaching those guys, finding tendencies in the other team and, just executing, having his guys execute what he could see, coaching those guys up and ready to go. But he was also a really good recruiter, not only for his positions, but in his area and teed guys up, teed other assistants up to be successful on the recruiting trail for their positions and guys in his area. So I mean, you lose something from that standpoint, and the contacts he had from that standpoint. So that's a big deal. But Shane has also used him as the assistant head coach and leaned on him for advice and how to navigate things. And he doesn't have that guy anymore. And sure, it's great to have your dad, who's Frank Beamer, and you can always run things by him. But sometimes it's nice to hear another voice and have somebody else who's in that building with you and knows the ins and outs of everything that's going on. And I think Pete provided certainly a steady hand for Shane. And so I think he's a big loss on a lot of levels. You can do a couple of different things with hiring for that spot, but losing Pete Lembo is certainly going to be tough on the Gamecocks.
No doubt about it. So on Friday, Shane Beamer met with the media for about 35 minutes and introduced the two newest hires to the program, James Coley and Marquell Blackwell. He also talked about Justin Stepp moving to tight ends. Any key takeaways or from Shane Beamer's portion of that press conference, maybe the most impactful things you thought he mentioned on Friday?
Oh, I'm trying to think back on what all was said
since then.
Yeah, more focused on basketball than anything else. But yeah, I mean, it was good to hear from Shane and his thought process. And I hadn't really thought about his explanation on why a tight end coach is as valuable as it is in terms of the guy having to be in the hands of or have his fingers in the passing offense and run blocking and really every bit of what the offense is all about. So I guess I've never really considered that. So it probably is a little bit beneficial for Justin in his future. But, I certainly think that he made a couple of very strong hires in Coley and Blackwell. And certainly good to hear Shane and his perspective on those things.
No doubt. So baseball practice is underway. The team will scrimmage Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And so for the dean of Gamecock baseball coverage, John, what are the 3 imperatives for this team during preseason practice and the things that you would like to see accomplished prior to them going into the Clemson series and then SEC play?
Pitching. That's the biggest deal. Like, you lost so many important guys and impactful guys in different roles. And you got guys who, Chris Veach will be probably in the same role as last year, but there's nobody else who's returning who's going to be doing what they were doing last year. Matthew Becker a little bit, he was a little bit of a weekend starter, but he's on him. But all of these pitchers are going to be stepping into something different. Like Eli Jones might be the Friday night starter this year. He started, I think it was 4 or 6 games last season. He was mainly one guy occasional start in relief to throw some innings. He had some nice starts like out at Arkansas, down at Mississippi State, or so he's had some moments, but he hadn't been the guy who's had everything on his shoulders. Roman Kimball could be in there as a weekend starter, and that's not what he was doing at Notre Dame. Forget last year. That's not what he was doing at Notre Dame. Dylan Eskew could be a weekend starter. That's certainly not what he was doing last year. He was throwing third innings against UNC Asheville. That's just so, it's these guys are going to be sliding into different roles, and how these guys are responding going into the season is going to be of interest to me. But, but beyond just how pitching sort of sorts itself out going into the year. And we all know that, the pitching staff is going to evolve a little bit, over the course of time. When I get my years confused, but whatever year Brett Carey's freshman year, like he was literally the last pitcher on the roster. Like he was the last guy. And by, the middle of SEC play, he was the closer. He was throwing important innings by the third, fourth weekend of the season. So things evolve on the pitching staff. But how things kind of sort itself out going into the year from that standpoint is certainly going to be a big deal. But, South Carolina doesn't have particularly good depth on the infield. For me, coming out of the fall and going into, coming back from the winter break, for me, you had starters at second, short, and third. Parker Nolan, Will Tippett at short, and Talmadge LaCroix at third. And then you had one guy, Lee Ellis, who could, play really any of those positions. For me, you had four guys for three positions. And as we saw last year, it ain't good enough. And, they tried some guys in some different over the course of the fall, and, things didn't look great. Played Causey at third base and didn't look great, and played. I mean, you did some different things in the fall that just didn't look quite right. And, they've done a few things here lately that have looked a little bit better. Tyler Causey's playing some second base and looks much better at second than third. So you feel a little bit better if something happens to Parker Nolan. Ethan Petrie's been playing some third base in these practices and has done a nice job over there defensively, like he did in fall of 2022. Fall of 2022, his freshman year, he played mainly third base and, did a nice job. But, that hole came open in the outfield and, he went out there and didn't take a ground ball again. So, he had to kind of readjust back to it, but he's taken to it well. So all of a sudden, third base has a spot behind Talmadge if, Talmadge can't get his hamstring right. And then, Lee Ellis is most natural at shortstop and he's there for Tippett. So all of a sudden now you feel much better about your infield going into the start of preseason practice and the depth there. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. And then, I think the main job that's wide open right now is left field and what's going to happen out there. Or at least one outfield position. I'm assuming Ethan Petrie will stay in right field and not at third base for the start of the season. And, Blake Jackson is going to be out there either in left or in center in some capacity. But, is it going to be Kennedy Jones? Is it going to be Dylan Brewer? I mean, Carson Hornig's been swinging the bat really well. He might DH, but, Brian Bakes has been swinging it really well. He might DH, but you can put Carson out in left. Evan Stone is still – the most elite defender on the team, and he's hitting a little bit better. Like there's the outfield position is pretty competitive right now, and how things. I mean, for me, Blake Jackson is starting somewhere. Ethan Petrie is probably starting in right field over third base. So how that other spot kind of shakes out is certainly of interest. But the team's going to evolve a little bit, and I don't know how firm things have to be going into the season, just because we'll see things change some. But it'd be nice to get out there and see some scrimmages these next few weekends to see what those areas specifically look like.
So earlier in the month, South Carolina picked up former Florida and Florida State infielder Jordan Carrion. I know there was eligibility issues as far as being a double transfer. Is there any latest on that? And what kind of player is he? What does he add, or what could he add to the roster?
Still not cleared yet. And I don't know what's going on well enough to articulate exactly what the holdup is, but he hasn't been cleared yet. I know he hasn't graduated from anywhere, so it's not as simple as a graduate transfer. So I don't know exactly what's happening to hold it up, but it's still up in the air right now. I mean, his eligibility is still I guess in question. He still has to be cleared. Right now, he's not eligible to play. He's eligible to practice but can't play. So, but in terms of what he brings as a player, I mean, he's been a starter at both Florida and Florida State. And those are two good baseball programs. So he's obviously doing something really well and something right. He's been fine as a hitter. He makes a lot of remarkable plays from a defensive standpoint. Doesn't always make the routine plays. He's a little bit hit or miss over there from that standpoint, but he's overall a good defender. He can play shortstop. They've worked him mainly at second and third base because they feel really good about Will Tippett and Lee Ellis over there at shortstop. And as just discussed, especially you're feeling a little bit better about what you have from a defensive standpoint on the field. But Jordan has been working mainly at second and third base to kind of shore up those spots in case something happens to a Noland or a Lee Croy. So, and assuming he gets eligible, but he's very versatile from a defensive standpoint, and he's been through it a couple of years now from an experience standpoint. Can certainly provide some of that. If you start at Florida and if you start at Florida State, you play high quality baseball.
No doubt about it. Well, John, I can't thank you enough for hopping on today. I know you've got some more duties with some spring sports media availabilities, but great stuff as always. Have a great rest of the week, and hopefully on Monday we're looking at 17-3, 5-2 South Carolina in the top 25 for the first time in a long time.
I think at that point you'd be able to certainly say that regardless of how the rest of the season goes, the Gamecocks will not finish last in the SEC as predicted by the media before the season started.
Yeah, I'm interested to see the receipts that Lamont Paris is keeping, because he certainly came to the SEC media days and he had some ammunition he was firing at the media for sure. So
Lamont and I spoke on after the media day podium chat, and I still haven't used some of those quotes yet that are much more colorful than what he was saying on the podium. So I've been kind of waiting for the right time to use those and to share those. But they're there, and they'll be written here probably sooner rather than later.
All right, great stuff as always, John. Hopefully we can get you back. Hopefully, they win. I was just thinking about it. If they win on Saturday, would certainly be favored. That'd be 17 wins. You'd only be 3 more wins away from 20 wins.
Hey, good math.
Yeah, I mean, that's hard for me. It's hard. But at any rate, hopefully, they're going to win enough games to make it to the NCAA tournament. I think if that happens, Lamont Paris is probably the SEC Coach of the Year.
Absolutely. I can certainly see that. So appreciate you having me. It's always good to be on.
All right, John, you got it. Take care.
All right, you too, Keith.
All right, that was John Whittle from thebigspur.com. Gamecocks, a great opportunity to go 17-3. Then you look at the next. Well, let's look at the next 5. Okay, so Missouri, who you beat on the road. Okay, you have at home Saturday at 1 o'clock on the SEC network. That could be 17. Now, Tuesday at Tennessee could be problematic. Rick Barnes has got a top 10 team. They got some dudes. It's on the road. That's going to be tough. Okay, then on Saturday, a week from this coming Saturday, you have a chance at Athens at Stegman Coliseum where you've really played better than in any other SEC road venue to avenge that Georgia loss. That could be 18. Then you get Ole Miss at home. I think you're better than them, but that'll be a tough game. That could be 19, the Vanderbilt at home on Saturday, February the 10th. That could be 20 right there. I mean, this team is certainly capable of getting 4 of the next 5 to get to 20. If you did that, what would you be? 8-3 in the league with 5 to go. 8-3 with 5 to go. How many, if you can get 2 more, you're 10, you got at least 10 wins in the league. So certainly they have a shot. Craig says if we win 3 more, Paris will have more wins than any coach in his second year. How about that? Look, I was very critical of Lamont Paris last year. In-game coaching, late game, time and score situations. In multiple games, they had golden opportunities at home to beat Arkansas and to knock off Alabama. And I didn't think, they did what they needed to do or what he needed to do to manage time and score situations. But this is a completely different year, a completely different team. And I mean, there's no real criticism of Lamont Paris. I think he's done a masterful job. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't really know, I know he's trying to keep guys fresh. I personally did not think Stephen Clark belonged on the floor last night, but like I said, Gamecocks had a season high 5 dunks and Clark had a dunk. And not only that, I thought he made a very strong move. That was the one they went to the table to review. They could have called a flagrant foul on him, but it was clearly a cylinder foul. But this team has total buy-in. They play great half-court defense. They're the number 1 defensive team in the league. They play with great pace. They play very similar to Bo Ryan's teams at Wisconsin. Great ball movement. They're not going, try to score 90 a game. They will shoot the 3, but they make the extra pass. They play that pack line defense. They're not going to get out in the passing lane and get a lot of steals, but they're going to stay in front of their man. They're going to rebound. They're going to box out. And they're playing winning basketball. And if South Carolina wins 4 of the next 5 and they're 8-3 with 5 to go, I mean, at that point, what's not on the table for this team? So it's all out there for them. In spite of the fact Miles Studi, who at least is a legitimate threat, right? Like he shot 40% in the SEC from behind the 3-point line at Vanderbilt. And, to go on the road to Arkansas, then to come back against number 6 Kentucky with a roster littered with future lottery picks. I mean, make no mistake about it. Kentucky has at least 4 lottery picks on this team, including Big Z, who was welcomed to the SEC by Josh Gray, but a very skilled player, no doubt about it. It's all out there for this team. So certainly the interest in men's basketball is at the highest point it has been in years. And this team, like Whittle says, they deserve like Lamont Paris said in the post game, this team with the record they have, and even if they didn't quite have the record that they have, they still deserve the type of crowds and the support that they are getting. Hopefully it's another packed house on Saturday, and really for every home game the rest of the season. So that will be a wrap for today. Gamecock women at LSU tomorrow. We'll be previewing that. We'll be keeping an eye on the search to replace Pete Lembo. Certainly some, potentially different ways Shane Beamer could go there. And so we'll be back tomorrow on Gamecock Pod Daily and back next week on Gamecock Pod Live. Appreciate all you guys and gals for tuning in. God bless, go Gamecocks, and I'll be back next Wednesday, same bat time, same bat channel. Everybody have a fantastic rest of the week. I'm out of here.